The iron collar bit into Kerra's neck as the auctioneer's assistant shoved her onto the wooden platform, and she stumbled forward, her wrists bound so tightly the rope had rubbed them raw. The crowd of humans gathered in the town square murmured and pointed, some with disgust, others with cruel curiosity, as if she were livestock being paraded for sale. Beside her, her younger sister Nira whimpered, tears streaming down her green cheeks, her small tusks trembling as she tried to suppress the sound. Kerra wanted to reach for her, to comfort her as she had done since they were children in their mountain village, but the guards had tied their hands separately, forcing them to stand apart even as they faced this nightmare together. "Two orc females," the auctioneer bellowed, his voice carrying across the square. "Strong backs, young enough to work for years. Captured near the northern border after their raiding party was dispersed. Start the bidding at 50 silver each," Kerra's jaw clenched. Raiding party. They had been foraging for herbs and mushrooms in the forest, nowhere near human settlements, when the mercenaries had ambushed them. Their mother had screamed for them to run, but Nira had frozen in fear, and Kerra had refused to leave her. Now their mother was dead, their father likely thought them lost as well, and they stood on this platform in shackles, being sold like animals. The bidding started slowly. A mine overseer offered 30 silver for Kerra alone, eyeing her muscular build with the cold assessment of someone calculating how much ore she could haul. A brothel keeper offered 40 for Nira, whose slighter frame and younger features made Kerra's blood run cold with protective fury. She snarled at the woman, baring her tusks, earning a sharp crack across her shoulders from a guard's stick. 60 silver for the younger one, another voice called, and Kerra's heart sank further. 70 for the strong one, the mine overseer countered. They were being separated. Kerra could see it happening, could feel Nira's panic rising beside her. Her sister's breathing had become rapid and shallow, the way it did before she had one of her attacks where she could not catch her breath. They had never been apart, not once in Nira's 18 years of life. Kerra had practically raised her after their mother had grown ill for those 2 years when Nira was small. The thought of being dragged to different fates, never seeing each other again, was worse than the collar, worse than the ropes, worse than the humiliation of standing before these humans who saw them as things. "Please," Nira whispered in their native tongue, so quietly only Kerra could hear. "Please do not let them take me alone." Kerra's throat tightened. She had no power here, no way to stop what was happening. She was just as helpless as her sister, just as bound and powerless. The rage that welled up inside her had nowhere to go, trapped like everything else about her in this moment. The bidding continued, climbing higher, and Kerra noticed that different people were bidding on each of them. The mine overseer seemed determined to have her, while a well-dressed merchant had joined the bidding for Nira, outbidding the brothel keeper. At least that was something, though Kerra had no illusions about what being a household slave might mean for a young orc woman in a human home. Then a new voice cut through the auction, deep and steady. 200 silver for both of them. The crowd went silent. Even the auctioneer paused, turning to locate the speaker. Kerra's eyes followed the collective gaze to a man standing near the back of the gathered crowd. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing simple farmer's clothes that had seen hard use but were clean and well-mended. His hair was dark, touched with gray at the temples, and his face was weathered by sun and wind. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with the build of someone who worked the land with his own hands. Around his neck, partially hidden by his collar, she glimpsed what looked like a military medallion on a leather cord. "That is quite the offer, Master Brennan," the auctioneer said, recovering his showmanship. "Though I think we might get more if we sell them separately." The bidding was quite lively. 200 for both, the man Brennan repeated, or I take my coin elsewhere. I need field workers and they look strong enough for the work. I will not split sisters. Kerra's breath caught. He knew they were sisters. How could he tell? Most humans could barely tell orcs apart, claimed they all looked the same, and he had said he would not split them. Her mind raced, trying to understand the angle, the trick. Was this better or worse than being separated? At least together, she could protect Nira. At least together, they would have each other. The mine overseer grumbled but did not raise his bid. 200 silver was far more than either of them would typically fetch, and everyone knew it. The merchant shook his head and stepped back. The auctioneer waited, letting the dramatic pause build, but no other offers came. Sold. He brought his hammer down with a sharp crack. The orc sisters go to Master Brennan Norwood for 200 silver. Guards came forward to remove their collars and cut the ropes binding them to the platform, though their wrists remained tied. Brennan approached, counting out silver coins into the auctioneer's hand with practiced efficiency. Up close, Kerra could see his eyes were a deep brown, and there were scars on his hands and forearms, the kind that came from both farm work and combat. The medallion at his neck was definitely military, marked with the insignia of the border legions. He glanced at her and Nira, his expression unreadable. "Can you walk, or do you need water first?" The question surprised her. She had expected to be dragged behind a cart or forced to march without consideration. "We can walk," she said in common, her accent thick but her words clear. She had learned the human language from traders who sometimes visited their village, though she had never imagined she would need it like this. Brennan nodded. He produced a water skin from his belt and held it out. "Drink anyway. It is a long walk back to my farm, and I will not have you collapsing on the road." Kerra took it warily, sniffing the contents first. Just water, clean and cold. She drank carefully, then passed it to Nira, who gulped it desperately. The man waited patiently, not rushing them, which was stranger still. When Nira finished, he took the water skin back and gestured toward a side street leading out of the square. "This way. Stay close." He did not grab the rope that still connected their bound wrists, did not drag them or shove them. He simply walked and they followed, because what choice did they have? The crowd parted around them, some people staring, others deliberately looking away. Kerra kept her head up, refusing to show the shame and fear churning in her gut. Beside her, Nira trembled but stayed close, their shoulders occasionally brushing. They walked through the town, past shops and homes, past humans going about their daily business. Children pointed and their mothers pulled them away. Men spat on the ground as they passed. Kerra had never been in a human settlement before, had only seen humans as occasional traders, or recently, as armed enemies. Everything here felt wrong, too small and cramped, smelling of smoke and unwashed bodies and strange foods. Brennan led them to the town's edge, where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to two large draft horses. The wagon bed was filled with supplies, sacks of grain, tools, coils of rope, other provisions. He stopped beside it and turned to face them. "I am going to untie your wrists now," he said, his tone matter of fact. "You can ride in the back of the wagon or you can walk beside it if you prefer. The farm is about 2 hours west of here. We will stop once to water the horses and stretch. If you try to run, you will not make it far. The woods around here are filled with hunters who would happily collect bounties on escaped orc slaves. Your best chance of survival is with me. Do you understand?" Kerra met his eyes, searching for cruelty or deception, but found only a kind of weary pragmatism. "We understand." He pulled a knife from his belt and Nira flinched, but he merely cut the ropes binding their wrists, first Nira's, then Kerra's. The sudden freedom made Kerra's hands tingle as blood rushed back into them. She rubbed her wrists, watching him carefully. "Can you drive a team?" he asked her. The question caught her off guard. "No." "Then in the back for now. There are blankets if you are cold." He climbed up onto the driver's bench with the ease of long practice, releasing the brake and taking up the reins. Kerra helped Nira into the wagon bed, then climbed in herself. The wagon lurched into motion, and they settled among the supplies, neither speaking for a long while. As the town fell away behind them and they moved onto a dirt road cutting through farmland and patches of forest, Kerra finally let herself assess their situation. They had been purchased by a human farmer who apparently lived alone or with few others, far from town. He was former military, judging by the medallion and the scars. He had deliberately bought them both and had not separated them, which meant either he truly needed two workers or he had some other reason for keeping them together. He had untied them, given them water, and offered them blankets. None of this fit with what she had been taught about humans. Her clan stories painted them as cruel, treacherous, violent. The mercenaries who had captured them had certainly been all of those things. But this, Brennan, seemed different, at least so far. Perhaps he was simply practical. Dead or sick slaves were worthless after all. "Kerra," Nira whispered, pressed close against her side. "What is going to happen to us?" "I do not know," Kerra admitted, wrapping an arm around her sister. "But we are together. That is what matters. Do you think he will hurt us?" Kerra thought about the question, about the man's steady hands and patient demeanor. "I think he will work us hard. Beyond that, I cannot say. We must be careful, stay alert, and look for opportunities." "Opportunities for what?" "To survive. To escape if we can. To get back to Father and our clan." Nira nodded against her shoulder, though they both knew how unlikely escape was. They were deep in human territory now, days from the border, surrounded by enemies. Even if they could slip away, the journey home would be treacherous for two orc women alone. But Kerra had to give her sister hope, had to give herself something to focus on beyond the crushing weight of their captivity. The wagon rolled on through the afternoon. True to his word, Brennan stopped once beside a small stream, watering the horses and allowing Kerra and Nira to drink and relieve themselves in the bushes. He offered them strips of dried meat and hard bread, which they accepted warily. The food was plain but not spoiled, and their stomachs were empty enough that they ate without complaint. "You have names?" he asked as they sat by the stream, the horses drinking noisily nearby. Kerra hesitated, then decided there was no harm in answering. He owned them now in the eyes of human law. "I am Kerra. This is my sister Nira." "Kerra and Nira," he repeated, as if testing the sounds. "I am Brennan Norwood. The farm has been in my family for 3 generations, though it is just me now. The work is hard but honest. I grow wheat and barley, keep some chickens and goats, a few pigs. I will need you to help with planting, harvesting, tending the animals, maintaining the buildings and fences. In return, you will have shelter, food, and clothing. I do not beat my workers, and I do not tolerate laziness or theft. Those are my terms." "We do not have a choice in these terms," Kerra pointed out, her voice harder than she intended. He looked at her directly, and something flickered in his expression. Regret, sympathy. It was gone too quickly to identify. "No," he agreed, "you do not. But I am telling you anyway, so you know what to expect." They finished the brief rest in silence, then climbed back into the wagon and continued westward. The sun was beginning to lower toward the horizon when they finally turned off the main road onto a smaller track, barely more than 2-wheel ruts cutting through tall grass. After another half-hour, a farmhouse came into view. It was a solid structure, built of fieldstone and timber with a steep roof and a wide porch across the front. Nearby stood a barn, larger than the house, and various outbuildings. A chicken coop, a smokehouse, storage sheds, a small stable. Fields stretched in all directions, some already plowed and planted with early crops showing green shoots, others still fallow. A vegetable garden grew near the house, carefully fenced against animals. Everything looked well maintained, but showed the signs of being managed by one person rather than many hands. Fences needed mending in places. Weeds grew thick in corners. The barn doors hung slightly crooked. Brennan drove the wagon directly to the barn and set the brake. "Welcome to Norwood Farm," he said, climbing down. "Let me show you where you will be staying." He led them not to the barn, as Kerra had expected, but to one of the larger outbuildings near the house. Inside, it had clearly been set up as workers' quarters, though it looked as if it had not been used in some time. There were 2 narrow beds with straw mattresses, a small table, 2 chairs, shelves on the wall, and a cold fireplace. Dust covered everything, and cobwebs draped the corners, but it was structurally sound and more space than Kerra had dared hope for. "It is not much," Brennan said, "but it is dry and warm enough with a fire. I will bring you blankets, soap, and some spare clothes that might fit. There is a well behind the house for water, and an outhouse between here and the barn. Meals are at dawn, midday, and dusk. I usually cook enough for leftovers, so you can eat with me in the main house or bring your portions back here, whichever you prefer." Kerra stared at him. "You are letting us eat in your house." "I am offering you the option," he corrected. "The kitchen table is large enough for 3, but I understand if you would rather have privacy." Nira looked at Kerra, confusion written across her face. This was not how slaves were supposed to be treated. This was not the cruelty and degradation they had been taught to expect from humans. "We will start tomorrow with the morning chores," Brennan continued. "Tonight, settle in, clean up if you like. I will bring the things I mentioned." He left them there, returning to the barn to tend his horses. Kerra and Nira stood in the dusty room, hardly believing they were not locked in, not chained, not thrown into a cellar or a cage. "Is this a trick?" Nira whispered. "I do not know," Kerra admitted, "but we should use this time to clean this place and make it livable. If he is going to treat us with some measure of decency, we should not give him reason to change his mind." They found an old broom in the corner and set to work, sweeping out the dust and cobwebs, shaking out the mattresses, wiping down the table and shelves. It felt strange to be cleaning a space that was, in some small way, theirs, even if only as property of the farmer who owned them. By the time Brennan returned with an armful of blankets, a basket of clothes, a cake of soap, and a bucket, the room looked significantly more habitable. "Good," he said, setting everything on the table. "I see you have started making it your own. The well is just there if you want to wash before supper. I have stew cooking, should be ready in about an hour." He left again, and Kerra examined the items he had brought. The blankets were wool, thick and only slightly moth-eaten. The clothes were clearly old, probably had belonged to his family members, but they were clean and mended. There were 2 dresses, simple and sturdy, along with underthings, stockings, and heavier work clothes, trousers and tunics that would be more practical for farm labor. The soap smelled of lye and lavender. "Come," Kerra said to Nira, "let us wash. We have not been cleaned since before the attack." They found the well and drew up cold, clear water, then took turns washing in the privacy of their new quarters, scrubbing away days of grime, sweat, and the stink of fear. Kerra helped Nira work the tangles from her long black hair, then Nira did the same for her. They changed into the clean clothes, and for the first time since their capture, Kerra felt almost like herself again. Almost. When Brennan called them for supper, they walked to the main house hesitantly. The interior was simple but comfortable. A large kitchen with a hearth and a table, a sitting room with worn furniture and shelves of books, a staircase leading to what must be sleeping quarters above. The smell of cooking stew filled the space, rich with meat and vegetables and herbs. Brennan was ladling the stew into 3 bowls, along with thick slices of bread and mugs of what turned out to be weak ale. He gestured to the table. "Sit. Eat while it is hot." They sat, still wary, but when the first bite of stew hit Kerra's tongue, her caution gave way to hunger. It was good, simple but well seasoned, and there was plenty of it. Brennan ate without speaking, apparently comfortable with silence. Nira kept glancing between him and Kerra, as if waiting for something terrible to happen, but nothing did. They simply ate, like 3 people sharing a meal, and Kerra found this almost more unsettling than outright cruelty would have been. "Thank you," she said finally, when her bowl was empty. "For the food." Brennan looked up, seeming surprised. "You worked hard today, cleaning that room." "Fair work earns fair treatment. We are your slaves," Kerra said bluntly. "You do not have to treat us fairly." He set down his spoon, regarding her with those steady brown eyes. "I suppose I do not," he agreed. "But I was a soldier for 12 years, fought in the border wars against orc clans, saw things and did things I am not proud of. When I came home, I decided I was done with cruelty. So yes, you are bound to this farm by law, and yes, you will work hard, but I see no reason to make your lives more miserable than necessary." "You fought against our people," Kerra said, her voice tight. "I did, and your people fought against mine. The cycle of violence goes back generations, and I am tired of it. I am just a farmer now. Yet you bought us at auction." "I did. Because I need help with the farm, and because I saw 2 sisters about to be separated and sold to people who would not treat them with even basic decency. I made a choice in the moment." He stood, gathering the empty bowls. "You can hate me for being human, for having fought your people, for owning you now. That is your right. But while you are here, you will be treated as workers, not animals. That is my choice." He turned to the wash basin and began cleaning the dishes, clearly considering the conversation finished. Kerra and Nira exchanged glances, a whole conversation passing between them in that look. This human was nothing like what they had expected, and that made him dangerous in a different way. Cruelty they could hate cleanly, could resist and plan against. But this strange mixture of pragmatism and rough kindness, this was something they did not know how to navigate. They returned to their quarters as the sun set, lighting a fire in the small hearth and wrapping themselves in the blankets. Tomorrow they would begin their work as slaves on this farm, but tonight they were warm, fed, clean, and together. It was more than Kerra had dared hope for standing on that auction platform. "You think he is telling the truth?" Nira asked in the darkness. "About not being cruel?" "I think he believes he is," Kerra said slowly. "But he is still human, still our owner. We must not forget that." "But Kerra, what if—" "Sleep, little sister. We will need our strength for tomorrow." Nira settled into her bed, and soon her breathing deepened into sleep. Kerra lay awake longer, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling, thinking about the human farmer who had bought them both, who had given them clean clothes and good food and quarters with beds and a fire. Thinking about the medallion around his neck, proof of his service in the wars that had killed so many of her people. Thinking about the long, uncertain future that stretched ahead of them on this isolated farm, far from everything they had ever known. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her and she slept. Dawn came early, announced by a rooster's crow and Brennan's knock on their door. Kerra woke instantly, old survival instincts kicking in, but it was only the farmer calling them for breakfast. They dressed quickly in the work clothes he had provided and joined him in the kitchen, where he had prepared a meal of porridge, eggs, and bacon. "The chickens will be your responsibility going forward," he told them as they ate. Collecting eggs, feeding them, checking for foxes or other predators. The goats need milking twice a day and fresh water. The pigs need slop and their pen cleaned weekly. Beyond that, I will need help planting the north field, mending fences, weeding the garden, and 100 other tasks. "I will teach you what you do not know." "I know animals," Kerra offered. "We kept goats and chickens in our village." "Good, that will make things easier." He looked at Nira. "What about you? What can you do?" Nira ducked her head shyly. "I am good with plants, growing things, herbs, vegetables." "Even better. The garden has gotten away from me these past seasons. I would be glad to have someone who actually knows what they are doing tend it." They finished breakfast, and Brennan led them on a tour of the farm, showing them where everything was kept, explaining routines and expectations. The property was larger than Kerra had initially realized, with fields stretching nearly 40 acres, plus pastures for the animals, and a small orchard of apple trees behind the house. It was clearly too much for one person to manage properly, which explained the state of disrepair in places. "The farm was built by my grandfather," Brennan explained as they walked between the fields. "He had 4 sons and they all worked it together, plus hired hands during harvest season. My father inherited it along with his brothers, but the wars claimed them one by one. My father died of fever 10 years ago. I am the last of the Norwoods, and I was away soldiering for most of my adult life. I only came back 3 years ago, and it has been a struggle to keep up with everything alone." "Why did you not marry?" Kerra asked, then immediately wondered if the question was too personal, but Brennan did not seem offended. "I was engaged once before the wars. She married someone else when I did not return after the first campaign. By the time I came back for good, I was too old and too broken to be appealing to the local women. And truth be told, I prefer the solitude most days." They spent the morning on basic chores. Kerra learned the routine of milking the goats, which was similar enough to what she had done in her village that her hands remembered the rhythm quickly. Nira collected eggs from the chickens and examined the garden with the critical eye of someone who knew plants. Brennan showed them how he wanted the fences mended, the proper way to mix slop for the pigs, where tools were kept and how he preferred them maintained. It was hard work, but not unfamiliar. Kerra had labored on her family's small farm her whole life. The movements, the smells, the satisfaction of completing tasks were all things she knew. Only the context was different, the knowledge that she did this not for her own family but for a human master, not by choice but by bondage. At midday, they broke for lunch, eating bread and cheese and apples sitting in the shade of the barn. Brennan stretched out on the ground with the ease of someone comfortable in his own skin, while Kerra and Nira sat more formally, still uncertain of the boundaries. "You work well," Brennan observed. "Better than I expected, honestly. Many town-bought workers need weeks to adjust to farm labor." "We are not town-bought workers," Kerra said, an edge in her voice. "We are from a mountain village. We know this work." "So you have said." "Tell me about your village if you are willing." Kerra hesitated, protective of her memories, but Nira spoke up. "It is beautiful there, high in the mountains where the air is cold and clean. We have caves for shelter in winter, and in summer we build houses of stone and timber. There are about 60 families in our clan. We hunt, farm what we can in the rocky soil, trade sometimes with other clans." "It sounds peaceful," Brennan said. "It was," Kerra replied flatly, "until your people decided to expand the border and declared our hunting grounds to be human territory." Brennan was quiet for a moment. "The border conflicts are complicated. They are simple from where we stand. You take our land, kill our people, and call us savages when we defend ourselves. You are not wrong, he said, and the admission surprised her. I spent years enforcing borders I did not fully understand, following orders I sometimes questioned. I saw orc clans destroyed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I also saw human villages burned, children taken, families slaughtered. There is enough blood and blame on both sides to drown in. Yet you still fought for humans. I did. They are my people, whatever their faults, just as you would fight for your clan, I imagine. Kerra could not argue with that. She would have fought to the death to protect her village if she had been given the chance. Instead, she had been captured, sold, and now found herself working beside the enemy on a farm far from home. "What of you?" she asked, turning the conversation. "Why did you really buy us?" "The truth, not pretty words about kindness." Brennan sat up, brushing grass from his shirt. "The truth is I was in town to sell grain and buy supplies. I had not planned to go to the auction at all. But I heard the commotion and went to see, and there you were, two young orc women who were clearly sisters, and I heard the bids starting to separate you. And I thought about my own brothers, lost to the wars, and how I would have done anything to keep them with me. So I bid. It was impulse as much as need. An expensive impulse. I can afford it. The farm does well enough and I have my military pension. And now I have help which I genuinely needed, so it works out for everyone. Except us, who have no freedom, Kerra pointed out. Except that, he acknowledged. And I cannot give you freedom. The law would not allow it even if I wanted to, which would raise questions I am not ready to face. But I can give you decent treatment and a measure of autonomy within the bounds of this farm. It is not nothing. It is not freedom. No, he agreed. It is not. They returned to work, and the afternoon passed in a blur of physical labor. Kerra found herself falling into the rhythm of it, her body remembering how to move efficiently through tasks. Beside her, Nira seemed to relax fractionally, especially when tending the garden, her hands gentle with the plants. Brennan worked alongside them, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. He showed them how to repair fence posts, the proper way to hoe weeds without damaging crops, how to tell when the soil needed more water. He was patient when they made mistakes and quick to praise when they did something well. It was strange, working with a human like this, seeing him not as an enemy soldier but as simply a farmer, his hands dirty and his brow sweating the same as theirs. That evening they ate together again in the farmhouse kitchen. The conversation was minimal but less tense. Brennan asked Nira about what she had observed in the garden, and she shyly explained which plants were healthy and which needed attention, suggestions for improving the layout. He listened thoughtfully and agreed to implement most of her ideas. "You clearly know your craft," he said. "I am glad to have your expertise." Nira blushed at the praise, and Kerra felt a protective pang. Her sister was too trusting, too ready to see good in people, but Kerra could not deny that Brennan had been nothing but fair in their interactions. Still, she reminded herself, fairness from a captor was not the same as kindness from a friend. Days turned into weeks, and a routine established itself. Wake at dawn, breakfast in the farmhouse, morning chores with the animals, midday meal, afternoon work in the fields or gardens or repairing structures, evening chores, supper, and then back to their quarters. The work was relentless but satisfying in its way. Kerra could see the results of their labor: fences mended, fields planted and growing, animals healthier and more productive, the garden flourishing under Nira's care. Brennan proved to be a man of his word. He did not beat them, did not curse at them, did not touch them inappropriately. He worked alongside them as an equal in labor if not in status. He shared meals and conversation, taught them skills they did not have, praised good work and gently corrected mistakes. When Kerra injured her hand on a piece of broken fence, he cleaned and bandaged the wound himself, his touch careful and impersonal. When Nira fell ill with a fever, he brought her medicine and insisted she rest until she recovered, taking on her chores himself rather than forcing Kerra to do double work. It would have been easier, Kerra thought, if he had been cruel. Cruelty she could hate purely. This strange, gruff kindness was much harder to navigate. She found herself relaxing fractionally, laughing at something he said, asking his advice on a task, sharing stories of her village without the bitter edge she had cultivated initially. And she hated herself a little for it, for softening toward the human who owned her. One evening, about 2 months into their time on the farm, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky turned dark green and the wind picked up, whipping through the fields and making the trees bend and groan. Brennan came running from the barn, shouting for them to help secure the animals and tie down anything loose. They worked frantically as the first fat drops of rain began to fall, herding the goats and chickens into shelter, securing the barn doors, bringing in tools and equipment. The wind grew fiercer and lightning cracked across the sky. Thunder followed almost immediately, a sound like the earth splitting open. Inside, Brennan yelled over the roar of the wind. Into the house now, they ran for the farmhouse as the rain turned into a deluge. Kerra and Nira had never experienced a plain storm like this. In their mountains, storms were different, snow and ice and wind, but not this violent, aggressive weather. They tumbled through the door and Brennan slammed it shut behind them, throwing the bolt. The house shook with the force of the wind. Rain lashed against the windows and something large crashed down outside, possibly a tree branch. The three of them stood dripping in the kitchen, breathing hard, listening to the storm rage. "Are we safe here?" Nira asked, her voice small. "The house has weathered worse," Brennan assured her. "It is solid stone and good timber. We just need to wait it out." He built up the fire in the hearth and found blankets for them to wrap in while their clothes dried. They huddled near the warmth, jumping at each crack of thunder, watching lightning flash through the windows. The storm lasted for hours, and eventually Brennan made tea and they sat at the kitchen table. The normal boundaries of master and slaves blurred by the shared experience of sheltering from nature's fury. "In my village," Nira said softly, "when storms came, everyone would gather in the largest cave and tell stories until it passed. The elders would speak of the old days and the children would act out the tales. We had something similar in the Legion," Brennan said. "On campaign, when we were stuck in camp during bad weather, the veterans would tell war stories, mostly lies but entertaining ones." "Tell us one," Kerra found herself saying. "A story from your soldiering days." He looked surprised but considered it. "All right. There was this time, about 8 years ago, when my unit was tasked with escorting a supply train through hostile territory. We were supposed to be moving quietly, but our commander was an idiot who insisted on full armor and banners, as if we were on parade. Sure enough, we were spotted and ambushed, 20 of us against what seemed like 100 mountain orcs. Kerra tensed at the description, but Brennan continued without malice. "We were pinned down in a ravine, supplies scattered, horses panicking. The commander was the first casualty, took an arrow right through his pompous throat. Command fell to me and I had to make a choice, fight and probably die or try something crazy. I chose crazy. I ordered everyone to drop their weapons and raise their hands in surrender." "Surrender," Nira said. "But you lived. How?" "Because the orc war leader was smarter than our commander had been. When she saw we had surrendered, she called off the attack. We all expected to be slaughtered or enslaved, but instead she offered terms. We would give her half the supplies and leave the rest. We would swear on our honor not to reveal which clan had ambushed us. In exchange, we lived and kept half our goods. "And you agreed?" Kerra asked. "I did. It was a better deal than being slaughtered in a ravine. We made the trade and she let us go." When I returned to the fort and reported what happened, I was nearly court-martialed for cowardice. But I saved 19 lives that day by recognizing when the enemy was more reasonable than my own side. The story hung in the air between them, a complicated truth about enemies who could show mercy and allies who could be fools. Kerra thought about the war leader in the tale, about the choice to spare the soldiers, about the pragmatism that valued life over pride. "What happened to you after that?" she asked. "I was demoted but not dishonorably discharged. Spent the rest of my service doing unglamorous work, patrols and guard duty. But those 19 soldiers went home to their families eventually, and I can live with the shame if it means they lived too." Outside, the storm began to abate, the thunder growing more distant, the rain settling into a steady rhythm rather than a deluge. They sat in the warm kitchen, the barriers between them feeling thinner somehow, worn down by storm and story and shared vulnerability. When the rain finally stopped, Brennan went to check on the damage. A large branch had indeed fallen from one of the apple trees, and some shingles had blown off the barn roof, but overall the farm had weathered the storm well. Kerra and Nira returned to their quarters, but that night, Kerra lay awake thinking not about escape or resistance, but about a human soldier who had chosen surrender over pointless death, and an orc war leader who had chosen mercy over slaughter. The next morning brought clear skies and the aftermath of the storm to clean up. They worked together to clear debris, repair minor damage, check on the animals who had been frightened but were ultimately unharmed. The work felt different somehow, more collaborative than before, as if the storm had washed away some invisible barrier. Over the following weeks, Kerra noticed the changes in herself and her sister. Nira smiled more often, hummed while she worked in the garden, had lost the haunted look that had followed their capture. She talked with Brennan easily now, asked his opinion on things, shared her own thoughts without fear. She had, Kerra realized with some alarm, begun to trust him. And Kerra could not entirely blame her, because she felt it too. The slow erosion of her defenses, the gradual acceptance that their life here was not the nightmare she had anticipated. Brennan treated them with respect, valued their skills, listened when they spoke. He had begun teaching them to read and write in common, saying that educated workers were more valuable and capable. He had given Nira free rein over the garden and actually implemented her suggestions for the farm. He asked Kerra's advice on managing the goats and respected her expertise. It felt less like slavery and more like an apprenticeship, or even a strange kind of partnership. And that terrified Kerra, because if this was not terrible, if this was actually bearable, then what did that mean about her duty to resist, to escape, to return to her people? One evening in early summer, after a particularly long day of planting, they sat on the porch of the farmhouse watching the sun set over the fields. It had become a habit, this quiet time after supper, when they were too tired to work but not quite ready to retreat to their separate quarters. "I have been thinking," Brennan said slowly, "about the future of this farm." Kerra's stomach tightened. Was he planning to sell them, buy more slaves, expand in some way that would change their tentative peace? "I am not getting any younger," he continued. "And while we have made great progress these past months, there is still more work than 3 people can reasonably handle. I am considering hiring some help for the harvest season. Free workers from the town. I wanted you to know before strangers showed up." Free workers, Kerra repeated. Working alongside slaves. I know it will be awkward, but I wanted to be transparent with you about my plans. Why? The question burst out of Kerra. Why do you care what we think? We are your property. You could do anything you want without explaining yourself to us. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and red. Because you are people, he said finally. Not animals, not tools. People who deserve to know what is happening in their lives, even if they cannot control it. And because, frankly, I have come to value your opinions. You both know this farm almost as well as I do now. It would be foolish not to consult you. Nira spoke up, surprising Kerra. I think hiring help is wise. The wheat fields will need many hands for harvest. And it would be good to see other people, hear news from town. You are not worried about how they will treat you, Kerra asked her sister. How they will look at you, I am worried, Nira admitted, but I cannot hide from all humans forever. And if they are working alongside us, perhaps they will see we are not monsters. Kerra wanted to argue to point out the dangers, but she could not find the words. When had her sister become so brave, so willing to hope? Or had Kerra herself become too cautious, too afraid to trust any positive change? I will hire people I know to be decent, Brennan promised. And I will make it clear that anyone who mistreats you will be dismissed immediately. You are under my protection, such as it is. Such as it is, Kerra echoed bitterly. The protection of our owner. Yes, he said without apology. That is what I am in the eyes of the law, but I am trying in what ways I can to make that bondage as bearable as possible. If that is not enough for you, I understand your anger. I would be angry too. His honesty disarmed her. She wanted to rage at him, to reject his offered kindness as the self-serving justification of a slaveholder. But she could see in his eyes that he genuinely struggled with the contradiction of owning people while trying to treat them well. It was not enough, would never be enough, but it was something. Hire your workers, she said finally. We will manage. The harvest season approached, and Brennan was true to his word. He hired 4 men from town, day laborers who had worked for his family in previous years. They arrived with the dawn on the first day of harvest, and Kerra could see the shock on their faces when they realized 2 orcs would be working alongside them. One of the men, a burly fellow named Hugh, actually took a step back. You did not mention you had orc slaves, Brennan. Did not think it mattered to the work, Brennan replied evenly. Kerra and Nira know the farm and will be helping coordinate the harvest. You will treat them with respect, or you will not be paid. The men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable, but the promise of fair wages won out over prejudice. They set to work cutting wheat, and after the initial awkwardness, the rhythm of labor took over. Kerra worked as hard as any of them, swinging the scythe with practiced efficiency, and even Hugh had to grudgingly admit she knew what she was doing. By midday, the ice had broken somewhat. The workers were too tired to maintain their suspicion, and Nira's gentle demeanor as she brought water and food to the fields softened even the most hardened prejudice. One of the younger men, a boy really, named Thomas, worked near Kerra and worked up the courage to speak to her. I have never met an orc before, he admitted. Except on raid defense, and we never got close enough to talk. Are all your people as strong as you? Kerra almost laughed at the awkward earnestness of the question. Strong enough. We work hard in our villages, just as humans do here. Do you really eat human flesh? He asked, then immediately looked horrified at his own question. Sorry, that was rude. My ma always said orcs were cannibals, but you seem normal enough. We do not eat people, Kerra said firmly. Human or orc, we hunt game, raise animals, grow crops. Just like you. Oh, good to know. He paused in his cutting, wiping sweat from his brow. Master Brennan speaks well of you and your sister, says you have been a blessing to the farm. He said that, in town when he was hiring. Said he had 2 workers who were worth 10 men each for their knowledge and dedication. Made some folks uncomfortable, him praising orcs like that, but he did not seem to care. The information settled strange and warm in Kerra's chest. Brennan had defended them in town, had praised their work publicly, despite social pressure. It was a small thing perhaps, but it felt significant. The harvest lasted 2 weeks, long days of cutting and bundling and hauling wheat, then threshing and storing it. The hired workers gradually relaxed around Kerra and Nira, especially as they proved themselves capable and hardworking. By the end, they were sharing jokes and stories during breaks, and Hugh even apologized for his initial rudeness. "You are all right for orcs," he said, which was probably the closest thing to acceptance Kerra was likely to get from a man like him. When the hired workers left with their pay and promises to return next harvest, the farm felt oddly quiet. It was just the 3 of them again, Brennan, Kerra, and Nira. But something had shifted. They had proven themselves to outsiders, had been seen as workers and people rather than just monsters. And Brennan had defended them, had spoken well of them, had stood by them despite social pressure. That night, as they sat on the porch in the cooling evening air, Brennan handed each of them a small pouch. Inside were silver coins, 3 for each of them. "What is this?" Kerra asked, confused. "Your share of the harvest profit," Brennan said. "You worked as hard as the hired men, harder even. It is only fair you receive something for your labor beyond room and board." "We are slaves," Kerra pointed out. "Slaves do not get paid." "Slaves in my house do, apparently. I am making it up as I go along." He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Keep it, spend it, save it. It is yours." Nira clutched the pouch to her chest, eyes wide. "Thank you," she whispered. Kerra stared at the coins in her hand, at this impossible contradiction of a man who owned them but paid them, who held all the power but tried to share it in small ways. "Thank you," she found herself saying, and meaning it. Summer faded into autumn and the farm prepared for winter. They harvested the garden vegetables and preserved them, salted meat, stored grain, repaired buildings to withstand the cold months ahead. Brennan taught them how to do these things in the human way, while they shared knowledge from their own culture about preservation and preparation. It was during one of these exchanges, as they worked together to build up the winter wood supply, that Brennan asked the question Kerra had been half expecting and half dreading. "You ever think about trying to escape?" The axe in Kerra's hand froze mid-swing. Beside her, Nira went still. This felt like a trap, but Brennan's face showed only genuine curiosity. "Honestly," Kerra said carefully, "every day at first, but less now." "Why less?" She set down the axe and faced him directly. "Because we are far from our homeland and the journey would be deadly for 2 orc women alone. Because we are well treated here, better than we would be anywhere else in human lands. Because my sister is happy, and that matters more to me than freedom. And because you have given us reasons to stay beyond the chains of law." "What reasons?" "Respect, fair treatment. A measure of choice within our bondage. The knowledge that we are valued not just as workers but as people." She met his eyes. "You have made it very difficult to hate you, Brennan Norwood." He looked away, something complicated crossing his face. "I do not want you to stay out of gratitude for scraps of decency. You deserve full freedom, and I am sorry I cannot give it to you." "But you would if you could?" Nira asked softly. "I would," he admitted, "but the law is clear. Orc slaves cannot be freed without approval from the regional governor, and such approval is never granted. If I tried, they would take you from me and sell you to someone far worse, and I would be fined or jailed. So we are all trapped in this arrangement." Then we make the best of it, Kerra said, surprising herself with the acceptance in her voice. Together. The first snow fell in late autumn, and Kerra and Nira experienced their first human winter. The farmhouse was warmer than their mountain caves, the food more plentiful, the work less brutal than they had expected. They spent long evenings by the fire, Brennan reading aloud from his books while Kerra and Nira worked on mending or other handcrafts. It felt, Kerra realized with a start one evening, like a family. Not the family she had been born into, but something new and strange and precious nonetheless. The three of them had fallen into rhythms of cooperation and companionship that transcended the legal bonds that tied them to this place. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her like a physical blow as she watched Brennan read, the firelight playing across his features, his deep voice bringing the words to life. She loved the way he smiled when Nira made a particularly clever observation about plants. She loved his quiet strength, his careful hands, his stubborn insistence on treating them with dignity. She loved the way he had slowly opened up over the months, sharing his past and his pains, treating them as confidants rather than possessions. It was impossible, forbidden, dangerous. He was human, her owner, her captor, regardless of his kindness. She was orc, his slave, his property in the eyes of every law. Nothing could come of these feelings except pain. But the heart, Kerra was learning, did not care about logic or law or impossibility. She tried to hide it, to bury these feelings deep, but she caught herself watching him when she thought he was not looking. Felt her pulse quicken when their hands accidentally touched passing tools or dishes. Treasured every small smile he gave her, every word of praise, every moment of companionship. And she began to suspect, with equal parts hope and terror, that he might feel something similar. She noticed the way his gaze lingered on her sometimes, the extra care he took to ensure her comfort, the way he seemed to stand a little straighter when she praised his work, the way he found excuses to spend time with them beyond the necessary, teaching them to read when he could have left them ignorant, sharing stories when he could have kept silent, asking their opinions when he could have simply commanded. Winter deepened, and a cold snap brought temperatures low enough to threaten the animals. They all slept in the main house during the worst of it, Brennan insisting it was foolish to risk the cold when there was room enough. Kerra and Nira took the guest room upstairs, and there were awkward moments of domestic intimacy. Sharing the washing basin in the mornings, breakfast still in night clothes, the casual closeness of people living in tight quarters. One morning, Kerra came down early to start the fire and found Brennan already awake, sitting at the table with his head in his hands. He looked up when she entered, and she saw exhaustion and something like despair in his eyes. "Are you well?" she asked, concern overriding her usual caution. "Could not sleep," he admitted. "Old war dreams. They come back sometimes in winter." She moved closer, hesitating only briefly before sitting across from him. "Do you want to talk about it?" He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly began to speak. He told her about a village his unit had been ordered to burn, about the sounds of screaming, about the children who had died because adults had made decisions about borders and territory and pride. He told her about the friends he had lost, the wounds he carried both visible and invisible, the weight of command and the burden of survival. Kerra listened without judgment, recognizing the pain of a warrior haunted by violence. When he finished, she reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she had deliberately touched him beyond the accidental brushes of daily work. "You carry too much alone," she said quietly. "You do not have to." His fingers tightened around hers. "You have your own burdens. Then perhaps we can share them. Burdens are lighter when carried together." They sat like that as the dawn light began to creep through the windows, hands clasped across the table, two people from enemy cultures finding unexpected solace in each other. When Nira came downstairs, they broke apart naturally, but something had changed. A line had been crossed, an acknowledgement made. The winter days continued, and the small touches became more frequent. A hand on her shoulder when he passed. Standing close enough to feel his warmth while working in the cold. Lingering glances across the dinner table. Nothing overt, nothing that could be clearly defined, but Kerra felt the electricity of it building between them. It was Nira who finally said something. They were alone in their room one night, and she looked at Kerra with knowing eyes. "You love him. There was no point in denying it." "Yes, and I think he loves you too." "It does not matter," Kerra said firmly. "Nothing can come of it. The law forbids it. Society would destroy him for it, and we are still in the end his slaves." "But what if you were not?" Nira asked. "What if there was a way?" "There is not. You heard him yourself. The governor would never approve freeing us." "Then perhaps we do not ask the governor." Nira's eyes were bright with an idea. "If you married, if you were his wife, the law would be different. A man cannot be married to his own slave. You would have to be freed first, or the marriage would do it automatically." Kerra stared at her sister. "That is insane." "Marriage between orc and human is forbidden." "Forbidden, but not impossible. I have been reading the law books Brennan has in his study. Marriages between species are not specifically illegal, just unprecedented and socially unacceptable. If you did it, if he was willing, you could be free. And he would be outcast, likely arrested, possibly killed by those who hate orcs. I will not ask that of him." "What if he would offer it himself?" Nira pressed. "What if this is a choice he would want to make?" Kerra could not answer that. The thought of being free, of being Brennan's wife rather than his slave, of building a life together as equals, was too beautiful and too impossible to contemplate seriously. But the seed was planted, and in the quiet moments she found herself imagining it. Found herself watching Brennan and wondering if he could possibly feel deeply enough to take such a risk. Winter turned toward spring, and one evening Brennan asked them both to sit with him in the parlor. He seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. "I have something I need to say," he began, "and I am likely going to say it badly, so please bear with me." Kerra and Nira exchanged glances, both tense with anticipation. "These past months with you both have been the best of my life since I came home from the wars. You have made this farm not just productive but a home. You have given me companionship and purpose and something to care about beyond mere survival." He paused, gathering courage. "Nira, you are like the sister I lost, and I hope you know I would protect you with my life." Nira smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "I know, and Kerra." He looked directly at her, and she saw everything she felt reflected in his expression. "I have fallen in love with you. I know it is impossible, forbidden, perhaps even foolish. You have every reason to hate me for what I am, for what I represent, for the fact that I own you. But I cannot lie to myself anymore. I love you. I love your strength and your fierce loyalty and your sharp mind. I love the way you laugh when you forget to be guarded. I love working beside you, talking with you, simply being in your presence." Kerra's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "Brennan, let me finish," he said gently. "I have been thinking about this all winter. I want to free you, both of you. I know what the law says, but I have been corresponding with a lawyer in the capital. There is a way, a difficult and risky way, but a way nonetheless." "Marriage," Kerra whispered. He looked surprised. "Yes. If you would consent to marry me, the law would require your freedom as part of the legal process. You would no longer be my slave but my wife, with all the rights and protections that entails. Nira, as your sister, could be freed as part of the household. You would risk everything for this?" Kerra asked, her voice shaking. Your reputation, your place in society, possibly your life. I would risk anything for you, he said simply. I am tired of living by laws and customs that devalue people based on their race. I am tired of being alone. I am tired of pretending this is just master and slave when it is so much more. If you will have me, I am yours. Kerra stood, crossing the room to stand before him. She took his face in her hands, looking into his eyes, seeing the absolute sincerity there. I love you too, she admitted, the words breaking free like a dam bursting. I have fought it, denied it, tried to bury it, but I love you, Brennan Norwood. And yes, I will marry you, consequences be damned. He pulled her close and kissed her, and it was everything she had imagined and more. His lips were warm and gentle, his arms strong around her, and Kerra felt something in her chest unfurl like wings. This was right, no matter what anyone else said. This was love, real and true and worth any risk. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nira was openly crying and smiling at the same time. Finally, she said, I thought you two would dance around each other forever. They laughed, the tension breaking into joy, and Brennan explained his plan. He had found a lawyer willing to handle the case, though it would cost a significant sum. They would have to travel to the capital to appear before a magistrate. There would be opposition, possibly violence, certainly scandal. But the lawyer believed it could be done legally, that the precedent could be set. It will not be easy, Brennan warned. We will face hatred from both humans and orcs. Your people may see you as a traitor for marrying the enemy. Mine will see me as a pervert and orc lover. We may have to leave this farm, start over somewhere new. I do not care, Kerra said fiercely. As long as we are together. As long as we are together, he echoed, kissing her again. They began preparations immediately. Brennan wrote to his lawyer, who sent back detailed instructions and legal documents. They would need to travel to the capital in early spring, when the roads were passable. The process would take several weeks, and they would need witnesses willing to testify to the authenticity of their relationship, and Kerra's good character. Finding witnesses proved easier than expected. Hugh, the harvest worker who had initially been suspicious, agreed to testify after Brennan explained the situation. Thomas, the young man who had worked alongside Kerra, volunteered enthusiastically. Even the town's elderly doctor, who had once treated Nira for her fever, said he would speak on their behalf. Those girls are good people, the doctor said bluntly. Better than half the humans I know. If you love her, boy, you hold on to that. Love is too rare in this world to waste. The journey to the capital took 5 days by wagon. They traveled slowly, stopping at inns that would accept them, which were few and far between. Many places refused service when they saw Kerra and Nira. Others charged triple the normal rate. But Brennan paid without complaint, his protective presence shielding them from the worst of the prejudice. The capital was overwhelming, a city of thousands stretching along a wide river. Buildings rose 3 and 4 stories tall, streets were paved with stone, and the sheer number of people was staggering. Kerra had never seen so many humans in one place, and she stayed close to Brennan, her hand in his. The legal proceedings began at the magistrate's office, an imposing stone building near the city center. The magistrate, a stern woman named Magistrate Alara, listened to their petition with a skeptical expression. You understand what you are asking for is unprecedented, she said. There is no legal precedent for freeing orc slaves through marriage. There is no law against it either, Brennan's lawyer argued. The marriage laws make no mention of species restrictions. And the slave codes state clearly that no person can be married to their own property, therefore marriage necessitates freedom. The intent of that law was to prevent masters from claiming sexual rights over slaves through forced marriage, Magistrate Alara countered. Not to provide a loophole for freeing them. Intent does not change the letter of the law, the lawyer pressed, and my client's marriage is not forced. It is consensual and motivated by genuine love. The magistrate looked at Kerra. Is this true? You wish to marry this man of your own free will? I do, Kerra said clearly. I love him, and I choose to marry him. And you understand that if this is approved, you will be free, but you will also face significant social consequences. You will be shunned by much of human society. You may face violence. I understand. I face those things already as an orc in human lands. At least as his wife, I face them as a free woman. Something flickered in the magistrate's expression, a hint of approval or respect. She turned to Nira. And you? What is your interest in these proceedings? My sister and I should not be separated, Nira said quietly. Master Brennan wishes to free me as well, as part of his household. That is legally more complicated, Magistrate Alara said, but potentially permissible if the marriage is approved. She sat back, steepling her fingers. I need time to review the law and consult with my colleagues. This will set a precedent that will have far-reaching implications. Return in 3 days. Those 3 days were agonizing. They stayed at a small inn on the city's outskirts, the only place willing to house them together. Kerra and Brennan spent the time walking the city, talking about their future, making plans for whatever came. He showed her the river docks, the great library, the market squares filled with goods from across the continent. She told him more about her culture, teaching him words in her language, sharing the stories and songs of her people. One evening they stood on a bridge overlooking the river at sunset, and Brennan pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. I made this, he said, opening it to reveal a ring carved from dark wood, polished smooth and inlaid with a small green stone. The stone is jade, the color of your eyes. I am sorry it is not gold or silver, but I wanted to make it myself, to put my own hands into creating something for you. Kerra took the ring with trembling fingers. It was beautiful, simple but crafted with obvious care and skill. It is perfect, she whispered, slipping it onto her finger. I would choose this over any amount of precious metal. He kissed her there on the bridge, and passers-by stared or muttered, but neither of them cared. They were together, and soon, they hoped, they would be free to build a life. On the 3rd day, they returned to the magistrate's office. Magistrate Alara sat behind her desk, several thick law books open before her. I have made my decision, she said formally. The law, as written, does support your position. A person cannot be married to their own property. Therefore, for this marriage to be legal, Kerra must first be freed. Additionally, as Nira is part of Master Norwood's household and sister to his intended bride, her freedom can be granted as a household adjustment. Kerra's breath caught. You are approving it. I am approving the legal framework. However, there are conditions. First, you must prove the authenticity of your relationship. Your witnesses will be called to testify. Second, there will be a waiting period of 30 days after the freedom is granted before the marriage can be formalized. This is to ensure no coercion is involved. Third, the marriage and freedom will be recorded in the public record, which means there will be social consequences you cannot avoid. We accept all conditions, Brennan said immediately. The hearings took another week. Hugh testified about working alongside Kerra, about her skill and dedication. Thomas spoke enthusiastically about her kindness and humanity. The doctor gave medical testimony about treating both sisters with respect and professional care. Other witnesses spoke, including the innkeeper who had housed them, who grudgingly admitted they had been respectful and paid their bills fairly through it all. Kerra and Brennan sat together, presenting a united front. They answered questions about how they had met, how their relationship had developed, what their plans were for the future. Some of the questions were invasive and uncomfortable, but they answered honestly, holding nothing back. Finally, Magistrate Alara ruled. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, I find that the relationship between Brennan Norwood and Kerra is genuine and consensual. Therefore, I am granting freedom to both Kerra and Nira, effective immediately. The 30-day waiting period begins today. After that time, if both parties still wish to marry, they may do so with the city's blessing. The gavel came down, and just like that, Kerra was free. Nira was free. They were no longer slaves, no longer property, but free women with all the rights and protections that entailed. Kerra felt tears streaming down her face, felt Nira grab her hand, felt Brennan's arm around her shoulders. "You are free," he whispered. "You are finally free." The 30 days passed in a strange limbo. They remained in the capital, living at the inn, getting used to their new status. Kerra found that freedom felt both liberating and terrifying. She could go where she pleased, speak to whom she wanted, make her own choices. But she was also vulnerable in new ways, without even the minimal protection that being owned by Brennan had provided. There were incidents. A group of men tried to corner her in an alley, seeing a lone orc woman as easy prey. She fought them off with the skills her father had taught her, leaving 2 with broken noses and 1 with a cracked rib. A merchant refused to sell her food, claiming his shop did not serve green skins. She found another merchant willing to take her coin and learned to navigate the city's complex web of prejudice. But there were good moments too. A human woman complimented the jade ring on her finger and listened with genuine interest when Kerra explained it was a betrothal gift. A group of children, initially afraid, grew curious and asked questions about where she came from and what her home was like. She answered patiently, planting seeds of understanding in young minds. Brennan was beside her through all of it, protective but not controlling, supportive but allowing her the space to navigate her new freedom. They spent their days exploring the city, talking endlessly about everything and nothing, learning each other in ways that had not been possible when ownership stood between them. Nira flourished. She found a small botanical garden in the city and spent hours there, talking with the gardeners, learning about plants she had never seen before. She made friends with some of the other workers, young people who saw her knowledge rather than her green skin. She was invited to dinner at a gardener's home and returned glowing with happiness. "They treated me like a normal person," she told Kerra that night. "They asked my opinion, shared their techniques, invited me to come back. Is this what freedom means? Being seen as yourself rather than your race?" "I think that is exactly what it means," Kerra said, hugging her sister close. The 30th day arrived, and with it, their wedding day. The ceremony was small, held in a garden chapel that Nira had found. The gardener who had befriended her offered to host, and a liberal-minded priest agreed to perform the rites. Hugh and Thomas came, along with the doctor, and a handful of others who had become friends over the weeks in the capital. Kerra wore a simple dress that Nira had helped her make, dyed a soft green to complement her skin. Brennan wore his best clothes, the military medallion at his throat polished to a shine. They stood before the priest as he spoke the traditional words, binding them together in law and spirit. "Do you, Brennan Norwood, take this woman Kerra to be your wife, to love and cherish in sickness and health, for as long as you both live?" "I do," Brennan said, his voice strong and certain. "And do you, Kerra, take this man Brennan to be your husband, to love and cherish in sickness and health, for as long as you both live?" "I do," Kerra replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss." Brennan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. Their small audience cheered, and Kerra felt tears of joy streaming down her face. She was free, she was loved, and she was married to the man who had seen her as a person when the world saw only a slave. The celebration was modest but joyful. They shared a meal in the garden, toasting with wine, laughing and talking late into the evening. Nira gave a speech about how she had known from the beginning that her sister and Brennan were meant for each other. Hugh told an embarrassing story about Brennan's early attempts at farming after returning from the military. The doctor offered wisdom about marriage and partnership. As night fell and their guests departed, Kerra and Brennan walked back to the inn together, husband and wife. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over law and custom and fear. The next morning, they began the journey home to the farm. Kerra and Nira were no longer returning as slaves but as free women, one of them now the lady of the house. The trip felt different, lighter somehow, though they still faced suspicious looks and occasional hostility at the inns and towns they passed through. When they finally reached the farm, cresting the hill and seeing the familiar buildings spread below, Kerra felt a rush of emotion. This was home now, truly home, not a prison but a place she had chosen. They settled back into the rhythms of farm life, but everything was different now. Kerra worked the fields not because she was forced, but because this was her farm too, her livelihood and her future. She and Brennan made decisions together, true partners in the enterprise. Nira took over complete management of the garden and began experimenting with herbs and medicinal plants, developing a reputation in the area for her healing knowledge. The social consequences Magistrate Alara had warned about did materialize. Some of their neighbors stopped visiting or trading with them. The town's priest refused to acknowledge their marriage. There were a few incidents of vandalism, rocks thrown at their windows, crude words painted on their barn. But there were also unexpected allies. The doctor visited regularly, bringing news from town. Thomas and Hugh spread word of Kerra's good character. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the community began to accept the unconventional household. Spring came again, and with it, news from the northern borders. The conflicts between humans and orcs were intensifying, with raids and counter-raids leaving death on both sides. Kerra heard the reports with a heavy heart, thinking of her father and the rest of her clan. She did not know if they survived, if they thought her dead or captured or worse. "I need to try to find them," she told Brennan one evening. "I need to know if my father lives, if our village survived. I need them to know I am alive and well." "Then we will go," Brennan said without hesitation. "It will be dangerous, but we will find a way." They planned carefully, consulting maps and recent intelligence about the border situation. The journey north would take weeks and pass through contested territory. They would need supplies, weapons, and a credible reason for traveling if stopped by patrols. In the end, they traveled as what they were, a human farmer and his orc wife, along with her sister, seeking to establish contact with orc clans for potential trade. It was unusual enough to be believable, and Brennan's military connections helped them pass through several checkpoints. The closer they got to the mountains, the more Kerra felt her heart pulling toward home. The landscape became familiar: rocky slopes, pine forests, cold streams rushing with snowmelt. And then, finally, they saw smoke from cooking fires rising from a valley ahead. They approached carefully, Kerra calling out in her native tongue to announce themselves. Warriors appeared from concealment, weapons ready, but then one of them recognized her. Kerra, Kerra, daughter of Gruck, we thought you dead. The reunion was overwhelming. Her father, Gruck, was alive, older and more weathered but alive. He grabbed her in a crushing embrace, tears streaming down his scarred face. The village gathered around, astonished to see the sisters returned, but the joy was complicated by the presence of Brennan. The clan warriors eyed him with suspicion and hostility, recognizing his military bearing and human origin. "Why do you bring a human here?" Gruck demanded. "Explain yourself, daughter." Kerra took a deep breath and told her story. She explained the capture, the auction, Brennan's purchase of them both. She told of his kindness, his decision to free them, their love and marriage. She showed the jade ring on her finger and introduced Brennan not as a captor, but as her husband. The clan's reaction was mixed. Some were outraged, seeing it as betrayal. Others were pragmatic, recognizing that Kerra and Nira had survived and even thrived. Gruck was silent for a long time, studying Brennan with the sharp eyes of an experienced warrior. "You are the human who bought my daughters," he said finally. "I am," Brennan confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I am the human who fell in love with Kerra and freed her to make her my wife. I know I can never undo the circumstances that brought us together, but I swear to you, I will protect her with my life and cherish her always." "Pretty words from a human soldier," one of the warriors spat. "How many orcs have you killed in your wars?" "Too many," Brennan answered honestly. "I carry the weight of those deaths. I cannot change the past, but I am trying to build a different future." Gruck raised his hand for silence. "My daughter is alive. She is free. She has chosen this path. Who am I to deny her?" He turned to Kerra. "Are you happy, daughter?" "I am, father, truly happy." "Then that is enough." He clasped Brennan's arm in the traditional warrior greeting. "You are part of this clan now through my daughter. Treat her well, or I will hunt you across this continent to take my revenge." "Understood," Brennan said with a slight smile. "And I would expect nothing less." They stayed with the clan for several days, reuniting with family and friends, sharing news of the intervening time. Nira was embraced warmly, and she spent hours with the village herbalist, exchanging knowledge and techniques. Some clan members remained hostile to Brennan, but others grew to accept him, especially when he helped repair defenses and shared intelligence about human military movements that could help the clan avoid conflicts. On their last night, Gruck held a feast in honor of his daughter's return and Kerra's marriage. The clan gathered, and despite the unusual circumstances, they celebrated with food and drink and stories. Brennan was toasted as part of the family, a strange honor for a human in an orc village. As they prepared to leave the next morning, Gruck gave them a gift, a small carved stone that had been in their family for generations. "May it bring you fortune and many children," he said. "And know that you are always welcome here, both of you." The journey back to the farm felt like coming full circle. Kerra had found her father, had seen her homeland again, had received her clan's blessing. And she was returning to the farm not as a captive but as a free woman, a wife, a full partner in building a life. As they crested the final hill and the farm came into view, Kerra felt a deep sense of peace. This was home. These were her people now. Brennan, Nira, and the slowly growing circle of friends and allies who had chosen to look past race and custom to see the people underneath. "What are you thinking?" Brennan asked, guiding the wagon down the slope. "That I am grateful," Kerra said, "for everything that happened, even the hard parts, because they led me here, to you, to this life we are building together." He took her hand, squeezing gently. "I am grateful too." Every day, they reached the farm and set to work unloading the wagon, falling back into familiar routines. But that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Kerra made an announcement. "I am pregnant," she said quietly. Brennan froze, then slowly turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Truly, truly. I realized it during our time with my clan. I am about 2 months along." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "A child," he whispered. "We are going to have a child. Are you happy?" She asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy, Kerra, I am overwhelmed, terrified, joyful, everything at once." He pulled back to look at her. "A child of human and orc, proof that love can bridge any divide. What a gift!" Nira, who had been sitting nearby, squealed with delight. "I am going to be an aunt." The months that followed were filled with preparation. They converted one of the upstairs rooms into a nursery. Nira used her herbalist knowledge to help with Kerra's pregnancy, brewing teas to ease nausea and discomfort. Brennan became even more protective, insisting Kerra rest more and let him take on the heavier work. The pregnancy was difficult at times, the mixing of human and orc physiology creating unexpected challenges. But the doctor from town visited regularly, fascinated by the unprecedented medical case and determined to help. He consulted with other physicians, with herbalists, even with the clan herbalist through letters that Nira helped facilitate. As Kerra's belly swelled with new life, the farm thrived. Word of the unusual household had spread, and they received visitors from across the region. Scholars interested in studying cross-species cooperation, young couples facing their own prejudice seeking advice, even a delegation from another orc clan curious about peaceful human-orc relations. Their farm became, almost by accident, a symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over hatred. It was not easy, and they still faced opposition and occasional violence, but they also inspired others to question old prejudices and imagine new possibilities. When Kerra went into labor on a cold winter night, it was Brennan who held her hand through the pain, Nira who provided medical support, and the doctor who guided the delivery. The labor was long and difficult, complicated by the baby's mixed heritage, but finally, as dawn broke, a healthy baby girl entered the world. She had her father's brown eyes and her mother's green skin, tiny tusks just visible in her gums, and a head full of dark hair. She was perfect, a living bridge between two worlds, proof that love could create something beautiful from division. "What should we name her?" Brennan asked, cradling his daughter with infinite gentleness. Kerra thought about everything they had been through, about the journey from slavery to freedom, from enemies to lovers, from prejudice to acceptance. "Hope," she said. "Let us call her Hope." "Hope Norwood," Brennan repeated, smiling through tears. "It is perfect." The years that followed brought their share of challenges. Raising a child of mixed heritage in a world still torn by racial conflict was never easy. But Hope grew up surrounded by love, learning both her mother's orc language and traditions and her father's human culture. She worked the farm alongside her parents, played in the garden with her Aunt Nira, and grew strong and wise. More orc-human families began to form, inspired by Kerra and Brennan's example. The farm expanded, becoming a small community of its own, a place where people of different races could live and work together in peace. It was not a perfect solution to the world's problems, but it was a start, a demonstration that another way was possible. On Hope's 5th birthday, as the family gathered to celebrate with friends from both human and orc communities, Kerra looked around at the life they had built. Her sister Nira had married one of the human workers who had come during harvest season and stayed, drawn by her kindness and knowledge. Her father Gruck visited regularly, having become an unlikely advocate for peaceful cooperation between the races. The farm prospered, supporting not just their family but several others who had found refuge there. And at the center of it all was Brennan, the human farmer who had seen two orc sisters at an auction and made a choice that changed everything. He caught her eye across the crowded room and smiled, the same warm smile that had slowly won her trust and love all those years ago. Kerra crossed to him, taking his hand, and together they watched their daughter play with her cousins and friends, human and orc children running together without the barriers their parents had known. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked quietly. "When you bought us at that auction?" "Never," he admitted. "I only knew I could not let you be separated. Everything else, this beautiful, complicated, wonderful life we have built, this has exceeded my wildest dreams." "Mine too," Kerra said, leaning against his shoulder. "I was so angry that day, so afraid. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. Our life," he corrected, kissing her temple. "Together." "Together," she agreed, watching Hope laugh as she opened her birthday gifts. "Always together." And as the celebration continued around them, as friends and family shared food and stories and laughter, Kerra felt a deep contentment settle over her. She had been sold as a slave beside her sister, bought by a farmer who had said he would take them both. That single act of unexpected compassion had set in motion a chain of events that had freed them, brought love into her life, created a family that bridged ancient divides, and planted seeds of hope for a better future. The road had not been easy, and challenges still lay ahead. But they would face them together, human and orc, family and friends, building their small piece of peace in a world that desperately needed it. And that, Kerra thought as Brennan wrapped his arm around her waist, and Hope ran over to show them a new toy. That was more than enough. That was everything,